Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. It's funny, isn't it, how a single moment, a few exchanged words, can just tilt your world on its axis. Not in a dramatic, earth-shattering way, not like in the movies, but subtly, deeply, in a place that resonates right down to your bones. I'm Sarah, and I've been married to Tom for what feels like a lifetime. A good lifetime, mind you. 27 years. We've built a home, raised 2 kids who are now off finding their own way, and settled into that comfortable rhythm that long-term couples do. It's a rhythm I cherished, mostly. But sometimes, if I'm being truly honest, that rhythm could feel a little too predictable, a little too quiet. Not unhappy. No, not that. Just settled. Maybe I was a little settled too, more than I realized. Tom has this friend, David. They've known each other since high school. David is one of those constants in our lives. Birthdays, Super Bowl parties, the occasional weekend barbecue. He was always there. A good man, quiet, thoughtful, with eyes that seemed to see a bit more than most. He's a carpenter, works with his hands, and there's an earthiness to him, a grounded quality that I had always found comforting in a peripheral sort of way. He was Tom's friend, you see. Part of the background of my married life. Pleasant, reliable, but not someone I'd ever had a truly deep one-on-one conversation with. Why would I? The dynamic was set. Tom and David would talk shop, sports, old times, and I'd be there, part of the general hum of sociability. The day everything shifted was a Saturday, I remember. Late spring, one of those perfect afternoons where the sun felt warm, but not scorching, and there was a gentle breeze rustling the new leaves on the big oak tree in our backyard. We were having one of our impromptu get-togethers. Just a few neighbors, Tom's sister, and David, of course. Tom was manning the grill, king of his domain, beer in hand, laughing that big, booming laugh of his. I was flitting between the kitchen, bringing out bowls of salad and chips, and the patio, making sure everyone had drinks. The usual hostess dance. I remember noticing David was a bit quieter than usual that day. He was sitting on the edge of the patio, nursing a lemonade, looking out at the garden I'd been working so hard on that spring. There was a pensiveness about him. Tom, bless his heart, was regaling everyone with a fishing story, complete with exaggerated gestures. I smiled, catching David's eye for a moment. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a flicker of a smile in return. Later, as the afternoon began to mellow, the neighbors drifted home, and Tom's sister announced she needed to leave. Tom walked her out to her car, and suddenly the backyard, which had been buzzing with chatter, fell into a comfortable quiet. It was just me and David. I started gathering empty plates and glasses, the familiar ritual of cleaning up. David stood up, not to leave, but to help. "Let me get some of those, Sarah," he said, his voice calm and low. We worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, stacking plates, carrying things into the kitchen. The light streaming through the kitchen window was golden, dust motes dancing in the beams. It felt different. Not awkward, but charged with a certain awareness. We were alone, truly alone, for perhaps the first time in all those years of him being Tom's friend. I was wiping down the counter when he spoke, his back partially to me as he rinsed a few glasses in the sink. He wasn't looking at me, which somehow made his words land with even more weight. "Your roses are really something this year, Sarah," he said, his voice still quiet, but with a different timbre to it. It wasn't just polite small talk. There was something else there, a sincerity that made me pause. I dried my hands, a strange little flutter in my chest. "Oh, thank you, David," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. They took a bit of a hit with that late frost, but they've bounced back, I think. He turned then, leaning back against the counter, and his gaze was direct, kind, but with an intensity that was new to me, or perhaps I just never noticed it before. "They're more than bounced back," he said softly. "They're thriving, just like you." And that's when I knew this wasn't going to be an ordinary conversation. My heart gave a little squeeze, a mixture of surprise and an odd, unexpected warmth spreading through me. I didn't know what to say, so I just looked at him, waiting. The air in the kitchen seemed to thicken, not with tension, but with a kind of quiet anticipation. His words, "just like you," echoed in my mind. It was such a simple phrase, yet it felt loaded, personal. I'd spent so many years being Tom's wife, the kid's mom, Sarah who hosts the barbecues. To be seen just as Sarah, and for someone to articulate that I was thriving, it was disarming. Especially coming from David, who I'd always categorized as more of an observer than a commentator on personal matters. I try, I managed, a small, slightly breathless laugh escaping me. It felt like a silly response, inadequate to the moment, but it was all I could muster. He didn't press, didn't make me feel awkward. He just held my gaze for another moment, his expression unreadable but not unsettling. It was more like he was giving me space to process his observation. Then he looked away, towards the window overlooking the garden, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the lawn. "Tom's a lucky man," he said, his voice still soft. "I've known him a long time. He's got a good heart, but he's Tom. Sometimes I wonder if he truly sees everything he has." My breath hitched. This was uncharted territory. We were talking about Tom, my husband, his best friend, but it wasn't gossip, not the way he said it. It was an observation, almost a lament, spoken with a certain gentle regret. I found myself nodding slowly, a truth I hadn't consciously acknowledged, or perhaps hadn't wanted to, blooming in my chest. Tom was a good man, a wonderful man in so many ways, but detail-oriented about emotions? Not particularly. He loved me, I knew that in his way. But the nuances, the quiet shifts in my own inner landscape, those often went unnoticed, lost in the routine of our shared life. "He's comfortable," I offered, trying to find the right word. "We both are, I suppose. It's easy to stop. Looking closely after a while, isn't it?" David turned back to me, a faint smile touching his lips. "Easy, yes, but not always best." He paused, then added, "I see you, Sarah. I see how you pour yourself into everything. This home, your garden. The way you always made sure my son, Michael, felt welcome when he was a shy kid and I'd bring him over. You have a way of making things beautiful, of making people feel at ease. It's a rare gift." My eyes started to prickle. It was so unexpected, this acknowledgement. Things I just did, things I thought no one truly noticed, or perhaps just took for granted. Not that I did them for praise, but to have them seen and named by someone I least expected it from. It was profoundly moving. "David, I started, my voice a little shaky. He raised a hand slightly, as if to say, "Let me finish." "I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable," he said, his gaze earnest, "or to criticize Tom. He's my friend. But I've been around a long time, watched you both, and I've always admired your strength, your quiet grace, the way you've navigated everything. There's a depth to you, Sarah, a richness. I hope you know that. I hope you give yourself credit for it." He wasn't leaning in, wasn't making any untoward gestures. He stood perfectly still, his hands resting lightly on the counter. The respect in his eyes was palpable. It wasn't flirtation. It was something far more profound. It was recognition. I thought of all the years, the quiet sacrifices, the times I'd put my own needs or dreams on the back burner for the sake of the family, for Tom's career, for the children. Not with resentment, not usually, but with a quiet acceptance that this was my role. And now, here was David, Tom's friend, seeing all those layers, acknowledging the person I was beneath the roles. It was like a parched part of my soul was suddenly being watered. "Thank you," I whispered, and this time the words felt right, filled with the emotion that was swelling inside me. That means a great deal to me, David. More than you know." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was filled with a new understanding, a connection that had been forged in those few quiet moments in my sunlit kitchen. Tom's footsteps on the path outside broke the spell, his cheerful, oblivious voice calling out, "Everything all right in here? Need any help?" David's expression didn't change, but there was a subtle shift, a return to a more familiar, neutral demeanor as he turned towards the door. The moment, so potent and private, was over. Or so I thought. Tom came bustling in, full of his usual energy, completely unaware of the profound exchange that had just taken place. "Just finishing up, Tom," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, though my insides felt like they were humming a new, unfamiliar tune. David just nodded, a quiet all good directed at Tom. The ordinariness of their interaction, the easy camaraderie, stood in such stark contrast to the depth of what had just passed between David and me. It was like stepping back into the regular world from a hidden, sacred space. As Tom launched into a story about something his sister had said, I found myself looking at David, really looking at him, perhaps for the first time. Not as Tom's appendage, but as a man in his own right, a man who had just handed me a gift I hadn't even known I was longing for, the gift of being truly seen. There was no awkwardness in his demeanor towards me now, no lingering intensity that might betray our conversation. He was simply David, Tom's friend, listening politely, a faint smile on his face. Yet something had irrevocably shifted. It was in the way our eyes met, just for a fleeting second, a silent acknowledgement that resonated deeper than words. The rest of the evening passed in its usual way. We ate leftovers for dinner, Tom and David talked about some project they were considering for David's workshop, and I mostly listened, an observer with a newly awakened inner world. I felt different, calmer, yet more alive. The routine of the evening, the familiar cadence of Tom's voice, the comfortable presence of David. It was all the same, but I was experiencing it from a new vantage point. It was as if David's words had polished a dusty window in my soul, allowing me to see myself, and perhaps even my life, with a clearer, more appreciative gaze. When it was time for David to leave, he shook Tom's hand, clapped him on the shoulder. Then he turned to me. "Good night, Sarah," he said, his voice gentle. "Thank you for everything." Standard words, the kind of thing anyone would say. But the way he looked at me, the quiet sincerity in his eyes, it carried the weight of our earlier conversation. "Good night, David," I replied, and I hoped my own eyes conveyed the gratitude I felt. "Drive safe." After he left, Tom yawned and stretched. "Good old Dave," he said affectionately. "Solid as a rock, that guy." "Yes," I agreed, a soft smile playing on my lips. "He really is." Tom, bless his heart, was already thinking about what was on TV. He didn't notice the lingering thoughtfulness in my expression, the slight tremor in my hands as I stacked the last of the dishes. And that was okay. In a strange way, David's words weren't about Tom's shortcomings, but about my own self-perception. Lying in bed that night, long after Tom's breathing had settled into the deep, even rhythm of sleep, I replayed the conversation in my mind. "I see you, Sarah. There's a depth to you, Sarah, a richness. I hope you know that." Each word was a balm. It wasn't about wanting more from David or less from Tom. It was about me. About the Sarah who had perhaps become a little submerged over the years, a little too accustomed to being the supporting act. David hadn't tried to flatter me or to create some kind of inappropriate intimacy. He had simply offered an observation, a reflection of what he saw, and in doing so, he had validated a part of me that had been yearning for acknowledgement, even from myself. The unexpectedness of it, the quiet sincerity, the deep, abiding respect that underscored his words, that's what changed everything. It wasn't a grand, dramatic event, but a quiet unfolding, a gentle recognition that resonated with the force of a revelation. I felt a profound sense of peace, mixed with a new, quiet excitement. A door had been opened within me, and I was curious, for the first time in a long time, to see what lay beyond it. The days and weeks that followed that conversation in the kitchen weren't marked by any dramatic external changes. Tom and I continued our life, our routines. We still had barbecues, David still came over, and the dynamic between the three of us, on the surface, remained the same. But for me, everything felt different. It was like the world had been turned up a few notches in vibrancy. I found myself noticing things I hadn't paid much attention to before, the way the sunlight slanted through the leaves in the morning, the intricate patterns on a butterfly's wings, the taste of my morning coffee. It was as if David's words had not only made me see myself more clearly, but had also sharpened my senses to the world around me. The biggest change was internal. I started to consciously acknowledge my own efforts, my own small achievements. When I successfully coaxed a new bloom from a struggling plant in my garden, I didn't just think, "Oh, good." I allowed myself a moment of genuine pride. When I managed to navigate a tricky family situation with grace, I recognized my own emotional labor and skill. David's words, "I hope you give yourself credit for it," became a quiet mantra. It wasn't about becoming arrogant or self-centered. It was about cultivating a gentle self-appreciation that had been missing. I found myself revisiting old passions I'd let slide. Years ago, before the kids, before life got so busy, I used to sketch. Nothing professional, just for my own enjoyment. I'd loved the feel of charcoal on paper, the challenge of capturing a likeness or a mood. I unearthed my old art supplies from the back of a closet, the scent of graphite and old paper strangely comforting. One quiet afternoon, I sat in the garden and started to draw one of the roses David had admired. My hand felt clumsy at first, unsure, but slowly, a familiar pleasure began to flow. It wasn't about creating a masterpiece. It was about reconnecting with a part of myself I'd neglected. My interactions with Tom changed too, subtly. I didn't bring up David's specific words. That felt too private, a gift meant just for me. But I found myself being more open with Tom about my own feelings, my own needs in small ways. Instead of just quietly handling everything, I might say, "You know, I'm feeling a bit tired today. Could you maybe handle dinner?" Or if I was excited about something I'd read or learned, I'd share it with more enthusiasm, not worrying if he was truly interested, but sharing it for the joy of it. And surprisingly, he often responded positively, perhaps sensing a new, quiet confidence in me. He even commented one evening, "You seem happier lately, Sarah." Lighter. I just smiled and said, "I am." The next time David came over, I felt a quiet warmth towards him, a gratitude that needed no words. Our interactions were normal, friendly. But when our eyes met, there was that flicker of understanding, that shared knowledge of a moment that had, for me at least, been transformative. He never brought it up, and I was grateful for that. His gift had been given, and its power lay in its quiet sincerity, not in any need for further discussion or acknowledgement. He had simply held up a mirror, allowing me to see a reflection of myself that was more beautiful, more capable than the one I had grown used to. That one conversation didn't magically solve all of life's little problems or erase the everyday realities of a long-term marriage. But it did something far more important. It reawakened my sense of self. It reminded me that even in the comfortable routines, in the familiar roles we play, there is always room for personal discovery, for a renewed appreciation of who we are. David, Tom's quiet friend, had, with a few carefully chosen words, reminded me of my own worth, my own thriving. And that, I realized, was a truly profound and beautiful thing. It wasn't about an external validation I needed to seek constantly, but an internal wellspring I could now tap into myself. The world hadn't changed, but I had, and that made all the difference. I was more present, more engaged with my own life, and that sense of inner richness, once acknowledged, continued to grow, day by day.